First email is from Vina, who is better known. Her full name is Mother of Zoe, who we've talked about a number of times because she's just a darling little kid. Oh, shoot, I always forget people's names. I think Zoe's 3. And Vina says, I love having kids. They are such a good barometer for how loving I'm being in so many ways. Oh, how brilliant you are. When children are unhappy, you can pretty much bet the parents are not loving and teaching. So Vina continues. Tonight, when Oliver got home, that's her husband, as opposed to, her boyfriend next door, which she probably wouldn't have sent to me to be broadcast. When Oliver got home, Zoe said, "Hi, Dad. I'm so happy to see you." There's nothing like getting a greeting like that from a 3-year-old. She says, "How was work today?" Oliver said, "Well, thanks, Zoe. I had a great day." Zoe's not done. She says, "Oh, yeah? Why?" So they go on and on. Vina says, "Clearly, I've been doing a much better job appreciating Oliver because this is not at all how she used to behave." Now, see, this is a subtle point, nicely perceived on your part, Vina. Children do follow the lead of one parent in how they feel about the other. So what you've noticed, for the benefit of those who may not have seen the point because they may not have had a 3-year-old lately, is that there have been times when Vina hasn't greeted Oliver with, "Oh, Oliver, it's so lovely to see you. How was your day?" And on those occasions, Zoe doesn't say that kind of thing either. So apparently Vina's been a good girl and treating her husband nice, and it rubs off on her 3-year-old. Everything we do rubs off on our 3-year-olds. Everything rubs off them when they're 1 and 2. And if we don't unconditionally love them when they're 1, 2, and 3, then I get to see them when they're 30, 40, and 70 years old, and their lives are crippled. Let me tell you, it's a lot easier to love an unwounded 3-year-old than it is to try to heal the wounds of a 50-year-old. We as parents have incredible power. New subject. Here's somebody who says, "My boyfriend, Jared, has pointed out many times how often I respond to questions or phrases by saying, 'I don't know.' He seems to think it's kind of funny, but I don't think that if our relationship progresses, it would be as funny. Like, for example, he asks me what I think about something or what I want. And when I say I don't know all the time, it would seem like it would make me appear less like a whole person and less like a real partner. Yes, you're right. People who say I don't know all the time are simply afraid to answer. They're afraid they'll get it wrong. And fear just screws up a relationship. It doesn't matter who you're afraid of or what the fear is of. If you're in a partnership and one person is afraid, it immediately distances them from the other person. You don't want fear in your relationship. You don't want fear in you. You continue. I never realized how often I say I don't know, and it actually bothers me now that it's been pointed out to me. I admit that I am innocent in many ways and somewhat naive. And there are many times I really don't know an answer to a question or what I want. But on the other hand, I think it's also become a habit. I think I say it for safety. Oh, bless you. This is the kind of honesty that would change people's lives. Growing up, I learned to say, I don't know, after pretty much every sentence, because we were not allowed to have our own thoughts and beliefs and so on. If we spoke up about anything, my mother would criticize us or shut us up in some way. We were essentially my mother's puppets, and we were conditioned to be this way. Oh, this is honest and bold and makes lots of sense. like I've said on many occasions, you learned to protect yourself when you were afraid. And your mother made you afraid all the time. So why would you ever take a risk and voice an opinion? Because she just cut your head off. So you learn to go, I don't know, Mom. Essentially saying, Mom, what is my opinion? You continue. I've already explained all of this to Jared. And he said the only way he sees this can be an issue in a marriage relationship is if he asked me a question and there was something I could think that I could think out, but instead chose to say, I don't know. Like if he said, how do you feel about this? And I chose not to think about it and said, I don't know. Like I'm choosing not to think it through instead of just saying something like, I don't really have an opinion about it. Pretty smart on his part. Now the real question is, what do you propose to do about this? So you've identified the problem. Consistently saying, I don't know, makes you not a partner. It makes you kind of a pet. And it may be cute at first, but that wears off. Partners actually want their partner to be somebody they can interact with, to have an opinion. Now, people who are looking to own a slave, and admittedly, some people do want a slave rather than a partner, but people who want a real partner want something of substance. They don't just want an extension of themselves. So what are you going to do about this habit? When you're asked about something, just give it a shot. What's your opinion about this? Resolve to yourself that you're not going to say, I don't know, and just give it a try. And if you look stupid, all the better, because it's actually more empowering to feel loved when you look stupid than it is to feel loved when you look brilliant. Kind of just common sense for people to be entertained by a brilliant answer. If you really can't think of something, then you might say, give me a second. When you say, give me a second before I answer, I've learned this in public speaking, rather than mumble and say, and the usual conventional pause phrases, I just stop when I'm speaking. Somebody asks a question, say, give me a moment. The entire audience can't wait for your next word. So try that. Give me a second. And Jared's going to be there going, cool. In the meantime, don't be afraid of this tendency. Don't feel inferior. Just be aware of your tendency to avoid difficult decisions, because that's what this really is. And you'll just naturally do better. New subject. When I was a kid, and this is me, being an addict had just terrible connotations. You referred to addicts as living in what they used to call in New York City the Bowery. I mean, you lived in the bus station and you carried a needle around in your arm. There was absolutely no positive way to use the word addict in a sentence. It had nothing but negative connotations. And then it became okay to be an addict to like alcohol, drugs, gambling. Those are the only three that are even listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is like the Bible of diagnoses for mental health disorders. Then it became even kind of cool to be an alcoholic, because you'd go to 12-step programs. It started to be in movies. Movie stars talked about, going to treatment, at Sierra Tucson or the Betty Ford Center or whatever. So then that addiction kind of came out into the open. Now we know a great deal more about addictions, but overall the word still has mostly negative connotations. Then the other day I saw what I never thought I would see, using the word addiction as a marketing tool, to use addiction as a good thing. I was working on the computer, and normally I don't even look over on the right-hand side of the computer where they have these unending and changing advertisements for everything. And I mean, that's just how the internet is now. And there was an advertisement that said, quote, free online game, which of course means free for the first 12 seconds that you use it. And it said, are you a strategic thinker? See, very clever, challenging you. Are you essentially good enough, smart enough to play our game? And then it said, join millions of addicted people who play this game. And I thought, wow, that is just brilliant. I mean, joining a community of people has always been a draw for anything you're selling, but now it's desirable to join a community of addicts. That's how the word has just lost its power. Now it's okay to sit in your basement and play video games for 36 hours at a time, because if you don't, well, then you wouldn't be part of the community of addicts. We're getting pretty crazy. New subject. A lady called me after practicing real love for several months, and she learned to be a real mother in her own home. She learned to be a real person. She learned to feel cared for. She learned to be more loving. She learned to be more responsible. In other words, she fulfilled all three legs of the stool of happiness: loved, loving, and responsible. She was a happier person. The other day she texted me and she said, something is going on. Now, I knew that because I'd been talking to her by Skype every day. But she said, everywhere I go, people are calling me sweetie. And they're coming up to me out of the blue, like at restaurants and standing in lines at the store, just to talk. This has never happened before in my life. And now it's happening regularly. When you feel loved, when you are loving, I know it sounds a little weird to some people, but there really are energies to us. There really are energies around us. You project an energy that draws people, and it's an energy that people can feel and they're attracted to. This lady is just one of uncounted hundreds of people who have described this experience to me. It's a beautiful thing to see the energy of somebody who feels peaceful and has the power that comes from peace. Whoa, very cool. New subject. Oddly, in one video chat, here's another one from Vina, the mother of Zoe, who's 3. Vina said, if I'd read ahead, we would have done one Zoe, but now Zoe's going to be a superstar. Vina said, I stopped wearing makeup this week. I miss it and didn't really feel ready to give it up because it's kind of a hobby, makeup. Not something I do so much to impress other people, but I realized that right now, Zoe, who's 3, can't tell what my motivation is. Oh, I might just break into tears. A mother who thought of her child. Can't tell you how many parents say, well, I can't see any real harm in whatever. Drinking alcohol in the house, smoking, cursing, yelling at my partner, screaming at the television set about politics, whatever. And the parents don't consider the fact that the child is taking in every word, every second of tension, every tone of voice, everything. These little children are like little sponges, little blank slates in Latin, little tabula rasa. We're writing on them all day long. Vina continues. All she knows is to imitate me. And she's been asking to use my makeup. Well, I'm not giving up fashion. I mean, I still have to get dressed in the morning, so I may as well wear what I like. But I've got to be more careful with that too, I'm realizing. I used to ask my husband how something looks, again, because it's a hobby of mine. But the other day, I heard Zoe asking her best friend, do you like my dress? Is it very beautiful? And then when her friend would respond, she would say, oh, yay. Susie, whatever her best friend's name is, thinks that I look beautiful. End quote from the 3-year-old. The mother says, I think this is not primarily due to my parenting, but, somewhat, and also due to the fact that she can't go anywhere without 10 people telling her how beautiful she looks or how cute her clothes are. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to counteract that. And I got to tell you, if you haven't seen a picture of Zoe, this is one gorgeous child. I mean, she really is. Venus says, what am I really waiting for to cut out the distractions in my own life anyway? Kill me now. This is just incredible insight and wisdom from a committed parent. I saw somebody not long ago who heard exactly these kinds of comments when she lived at home with her parents. If she had put on, a whole 6 ounces of fat on her 6-year-old skinny little body, her father would come along and pinch this imperceptible little piece of fat and say, now, what are we going to do about this? When she was 6 years old. Everybody that she knew talked constantly about being slim, skinny, beautiful. She learned to devour beauty magazines from the time she was a little girl. Well, by the time she became an adult, she was absolutely addicted to her appearance. Couldn't pass a mirror without checking herself 5 times, weighed herself 20 times a day, careful what she ate, often binge ate. She was bulimic. She starved herself. She just became a full-blown eating disorder, all from the innocent little comments that her parents, her sisters, and everybody around her made when they said little things like, oh, aren't you just a beautiful little girl? Well, these little kids are not stupid. They can see that nobody says to the little chubby kid, oh, aren't you a beautiful little girl? The kids notice this stuff. They ain't dumb. And this woman's life was, until recently, pretty much destroyed by this. She had to conform to the desired image of people she would never really care about. People who would never really care about her. So she was a prisoner to blind and meaningless opinions. Yuck. So what Vina is talking about here in working with her daughter Zoe and being aware of her attachment to appearance is, I'm not kidding, literally life-saving. Vina says, today we had this conversation. Zoe said, I love your shoes, Mom. They're very beautiful. Exactly the kind of thing she's heard her little friends and other adults and her mother say. Vina says, thanks. Do you know what it means when somebody says that you're beautiful? Zoe, what? Her mother, brilliantly, it means nothing. It doesn't matter how you look or what you wear. Well, now, Zoe's obviously puzzled because it sure appears to matter to everybody else in the world. But Zoe says, why, Mom? Because Mom says, what matters is whether you're loved. Do Mommy and Daddy love you? Zoe bursts into a grin, bigger than the grin that she gets when somebody tells her, oh, you're so beautiful. Because children actually sense deep down inside that it's a trap. That once you're praised for being beautiful, you have to stay that way. They do get it. That's how they grow up to be bulimics when they're 14. So she grins and said, yeah, you and Daddy love me. Vina says, would we love you if you were ugly? Zoe said, yeah. Her mother said, we would. What about God? Would he still love you? Zoe says, yeah. And Jesus too? And Vina said, yes, because you are a child of God no matter what you wear or how you look. God loves people no matter how they look. Then she asked a brilliant question of her 3-year-old. Do you know anybody who is ugly? And the 3-year-old said, no, everyone is beautiful. Oh, is that just takes my breath away. Out of the mouths of babes, everybody is beautiful. Zoe continues, but I think caterpillars are ugly. So Zoe and I are right on the same wavelength there, but she understands what matters. And Vina says, does Heavenly Father love caterpillars? Zoe said, yeah, Vina, that's right. And he loves people even if he loves people even if you don't like them. Who do you not like? She's really teaching this 3-year-old a lesson, and the 3-year-old's just lapping up every word of it. She said, well, I don't like scary monsters. Vina said, okay, well, if somebody didn't like you, it wouldn't matter because God would still love you. And at this point, we had to go out the door, and Zoe said, Mommy, can you keep talking to me about this later? Because she didn't want the conversation to end. Now, for the benefit of everybody listening, this is loving and teaching. That's what it is. And now I get to die happy. Donna has asked me not to die right now, but I could. This is from a woman who has had a difficult time at work for years. She's lost a lot of jobs. She is living proof that there's no such thing as I can't find a job, because she's held at least 20 that I know of. But then she gets easily frustrated. And when she gets frustrated, she doesn't do her job, and then she gets fired. She now works at a center for learning disabled and emotionally troubled kids. I would not have thought that would be the very best job for somebody who has trouble. But she says, it feels like I'm being expected to be everywhere all at once. It's true that I've been given 2 of the most challenging kids, and if I had a full day with either of them, or even a half hour uninterrupted to devote full attention and listening to them, it would be great, but I don't. During the day, I start to stay with one of the 2 really difficult kids, which is at the limits of impossible anyway, but as I do, the supervisor tells me to stop her kids, other kids' disruptive behavior, leave to check on her kids so she can keep sitting and texting on the phone and eat and laugh with the other staff who's also doing nothing. I'm beginning to resent her, and resent that I end up devoting all this energy to finding out what she wants only to have her change her mind. On rare occasions, she does know and give clear instructions. In the middle of trying to love and teach the kids, the supervisor tells me to leave them alone and then go change kids' diapers. So it's just changing all the time, and I do whatever I'm told to do. It's not doing the diapers that bothers me. What bothers me is that she and everybody else just has me do everything so that they can keep laughing, joking, eating, and texting. I can't be everywhere. So I can hear my victim right now. So much of this has to be me. I know that the staff hates that I'm not part of the herd, that I'm not like them. They don't understand me. The part that I find hard is that I just can't do everything I'm asked to do, and it's emotionally draining. Many of us who are listening are identifying with this kind of difficult job where it changes all the time and we're supposed to do everything. And she says, I end up feeling lost and alone, and this is not what I want. But I did get back to the truth that there are people who love me. She says, but what am I doing to keep making this happen? It appears to be complicated. It's not. Never is. Hardly ever. It's impossible to please everyone. It is. You just can't make everybody around you happy. But that's not your problem. Your problem is you're worrying about it. Clear back in, I think it was like 100 AD. I'm within a few years of it. Marcus Aurelius, one of the last, I think second to the last emperor of Rome, was saying, there's no thing that by itself rarely is a thing good or bad, but that we can make it so by our perception of it. When you worry, everything just turns to poop. Other people really are wounded to the point that pleasing them can't be done. But you just do your best. You ask for feedback and you move on without worrying. No fear. Worrying is not a step. I've never seen worry accomplish a thing. They ask you to leave the impossible child to take care of their kids. What do? Instead of worrying, you say, I'd be happy to do that, you say to these people who are sitting around doing nothing. So while I go and do that, then you will watch Billy, the impossible kid, right? You see what you've done? You will do anything your supervisor asks. That's what you're there for. But then you make it clear that in order to do the job they just asked you to do, you have to leave the one you were doing so that they can't keep blaming you. You'll communicate that they have a job to do without complaining about how they do nothing. So you communicate responsibility to them, but you don't accuse them of anything. And you communicate that every time they ask you to stop what you're doing, that you'll be leaving something else. Now, you asked, what do I do that keeps making this happen? You are often afraid. I know you well. You're afraid about lots of things. And when you're afraid at work, it puts a mark on your forehead. 2 marks, actually. The first one says, use me. When you're afraid, you're a target for every user on the planet. And the second mark says, I'm not one of you. I'm separated from the herd. I'm frightened and alone. So now I'm an object and you don't have to care about me. Fear alienates you from everyone and it makes your decision-making impaired. So what do? You go to work remembering the love of the people who do care about you. Then you won't be nearly as afraid. You'll make better decisions. You won't be as isolated. You can actually enjoy your job. These sound like simple things to do, but when we've been overwhelmed with fear for a lifetime, they might be simple, but not necessarily easy. It's still the answer, though. New subject. From a woman who's been doing real love for a while. Each of her children has had to learn that life is happier when we're loving. And her youngest is Sarah, who's like 13. And is fighting the process of learning responsibility. So the mother is loving and teaching and sometimes using consequences. Mother says, Sarah, her daughter, was a bit victim-y about temporarily losing more privileges this morning because she hadn't completed some assignment she had been given before. So the kid was given an assignment. The consequence of not completing the assignment was that she would lose some privilege. But then she acted victim-y about a consequence that she'd brought on herself. Solution. The moment that she acts like a victim about anything, and in any way, like sighing or saying something snotty or whining or anything, by the way, you can apply this at work with employees too, but at least with a child, you have to say something. This spreads like a poison in a child's life. It spreads like poison in a workplace. I ran many workplaces in my life, and I would put up with mistakes, incompetence, not being informed, anything, but never whining and complaining. It spreads like a fire. So the instant you hear it, you have to say something. Immediately you say, Sarah, what are you doing right now? How are you talking to me? Now notice, it's questions you ask. And then you require her to teach you what she's doing, like acting like a victim, and how it hurts her. You make her tell you what she's doing instead of what every parent does, which is you telling her what she's doing. When you teach, it goes right over her head. She just ignores it. When she has to say it, she remembers it much better. The mom says, I will search blogs and book sections about defending, justifying, and wanting to be right so that I can share them with her, but I wonder if you'd be willing to talk about these 3 behaviors on a video chat. She has heard the harmful effect of these from me at family meetings and individually, like again this morning, but she's obviously resisting real love teachings from me at the moment, so an outside source would be helpful. The 3 behaviors she was talking about are defending, justifying, and wanting to be right. Again, you turn it back on her. We keep doing our kids' work. So our kids are irresponsible, so what do? We take the responsibility of nagging them. We pay the price. for them not being responsible. Well, how stupid is that? Or a child doesn't do something, and so we clean it up. Or a child leaves their homework at home, and we take it to school. This is just moronic. It's almost like we're training our children to be irresponsible. So if you might say to her, if one of her friends breaks a promise or is rude and then defends herself, how does Sarah feel? Does she feel cared for? No. Defending is selfish, and it gets between them. And she needs to say that. Well, what if a friend justifies the mistake that she made? It's just a way of saying how she'll be unloving the next time. You're teaching Sarah how her behavior is just as bad as she would take it from a friend. How about wanting to be right? Wanting to be right is always totally selfish. All three of these behaviors would alienate Sarah from a friend who did them. So then you say, so Sarah, when you do these things, what is the effect on other people? And you keep with her until she can say, well, other people would hate it. And I would feel alone. And then I would have no friends. And in future relationships, like with a partner, these behaviors would just kill me, and at work and everywhere else in my life. This business of loving and teaching our children is saving their lives. And when we take that seriously as parents, no kidding, no exaggerating, we change the world. That's how you do it. You want to change the world? Raise a child well. Love and teach them. New subject. My biggest challenge, the writer says, I can't remember who, is when people behave badly, especially toward me, I do not know what to do with myself. I don't know what I think or feel. I don't know what to say. I have made a decision that it just doesn't matter anymore, because if I'm treated badly, I will email you when it happens if I feel confused, uncomfortable, or afraid. Or if you're not available, I'll find somebody else. Well, honey, that's just brilliant. If you can handle something on your own, you do. If you can't, you get help. There was a study done many years ago that analyzed the different characteristics of people who were successful and happy. It's been a lot of years, and I can't remember the name of the study. And they found that the people who were successful and happy were the people who knew when to ask for help. And if you feel confused and lost when people treat you badly, you excuse yourself and you go ask for help. If you remember that you're loved a lot when people behave badly, you really just won't care. It really is just like you won the lottery and you have $20 million and then somebody laughs at you. Somebody laughs at you when you've just won the lottery. I just don't think you're going to, make a big thing of it, because you have a lot of something else. In this case, if you have a lot of love, nothing can bother you. It really works. I do this every day. I'm not just talking about a theory. I have the greatest life in the world. I do. I feel like that all day. Why shouldn't you? So when people are rude or nasty or whatever, and I get plenty of that in a day, I think, they must be in a lot of pain. I'm not, and I'm glad they can't take away my happiness. If I can do something to help them, fine. But if not, they still can't take my happiness. And honey, they can't take yours either. New subject, from a woman whose marriage had been, pretty terrible. And she didn't even want to be married anymore. She was just fed up with it. She's learned a lot from feeling loved and loving others. And she writes, my husband, we'll call him Harry. Harry's favorite place in the whole world is Bryce National Park in Utah. He's gone there a couple of times, and he especially likes going in winter when there's nobody there. I've been to Bryce National Park in the winter, and it's really pretty gorgeous. We were thinking that we wanted to go there just before Christmas, since there's snow, and we don't ever see snow there. I wasn't 100% sure about it, but I went along with everything until I felt like it was just going to be too stressful. I realized that I really hadn't been myself, that I had done some pleasing of my husband, because he obviously wanted to go, and so I went along with his plans, and I've been too afraid to say what I thought and wanted. We'd have to take along 2 little kids. I was feeling tired, and I didn't want to make the long drive in the winter. Anyway, I'm glad that the disagreement on how long we'd stay came up, because it was a great wake-up call for me to see that I didn't know if I wanted to go in the first place. Well, bless your heart. It's not uncommon at all that we agree to things just to be agreeable and to avoid conflict. And then later, we hate what we agreed to. We agreed to Thanksgiving with the family, and then we realized that we've hated the previous 20 Thanksgivings with our family. We agree to do a service project for somebody when we don't really want to, and then we go and do it anyway, and it just drains us and saps our energy, and we're not there for our families, and on and on and on. We want the conflict of the moment to go away, so we agree to stuff. Somebody tonight agreed to do something with me at a very specified time. And at the last minute, she texted and said, "I've changed my mind. I think I'm too tired. I'm going to go to bed." And then I talked to her for just a moment. She was afraid that I would be irritated. "Oh, my dear, I don't care." She said, "I'm a person of my word." So now we're on to a subject that many people would disagree about, but clearly I don't care. You promise that you'll do something with the best information you have at the time. And then all the rest of our lives, we're constantly gathering information. Well, what in the world do we gather information for except to make decisions or to alter previous decisions? So what if I agree to do something and then I get a cold and I don't feel very good? And if I went and did it, I'd come back feeling just terrible, and I'd be in bed 2 extra days, and I wouldn't be helpful to anybody around the house, and I wouldn't be able to love the kids, and I wouldn't be able to talk to people on the phone, and I wouldn't be available for Donna. Well, then was it really worth it that I went and did that thing just because I said I would? Information changes. And with changing information, we change our decisions. That's why we gather it. So this person continues. So I called a wise person, and we had a wonderful conversation. Remember, we were talking about Bryce National Park. That's where we started and somehow ended up some other crazy place. And it's just the best thing in the world to have somebody help me feel free to figure out what I really want, rather than immediately jump to sacrificing myself and forgetting who I am. So I went back to my husband, and I told him that I'd been confused about what I wanted, and I told him what I was willing to do and not do. And it really felt good. I felt like myself again immediately. Now, he argued a bit because clearly he wanted to go to the park. He talked about how he's good at quoting real love principles for his own benefit. He talked about how the real love principle of everyone getting what they want really doesn't exist, that we need to make a compromise, that somebody always has to give up what they want and lose. He was afraid that he wouldn't get what he wanted. Yeah, he's afraid of that a lot. He's afraid of not getting what he wants. He forgets that if what he wants gets in the way of his partner's happiness, his life partner, the other half of him, why would he pursue such a thing? Why would I insist on doing something that would significantly inconvenience or hurt the feelings of my partner? Why would I do that? When you're in a partnership, doing anything that would hurt your partner will hurt you, because you're not completely separate anymore when you're partners. So this woman continued. I think I did a pretty good job at explaining myself and my behavior. And the whole time I held his hand, looked him in the eye. I told him that he might not get what he wants going to Bryce, but he would get a wife who is true to her feelings, who doesn't lie and pretend to be okay with something only to build up resentment and make him pay for it later. I said, We all know how that goes, and I know you don't like it when it turns out like that. Well, that's just genius, honey. Instead of being selfish, you just described what you needed and how it would benefit him and both of you. You continue. He also expressed some fear that he was the bad guy pressuring me, and I could honestly tell him that this had nothing to do with him and everything to do with my fear of saying what I need and want. That's just the truth. I'm learning to communicate with him better. Yes, he argued. Yes, he felt accused, but his heart's in the right place, and that's what's most important. Listen to this attitude. They disagree about something, but she's seeing the good in him and seeing what she's capable of doing. She says, when I said that he'd get a happy wife who's honest and relaxed, I could tell that he recognized that that's what he really wants most, even more than going to a canyon. And how blessed am I to have a husband like that, who recognizes that, who's happy to see me happy. On the surface, he might argue and defend and maybe even attack or blame, but at his core, he is open and searches for the truth and love. I'd much rather have it that way than the other way around, and I'm getting better at recognizing that that's who he is. Not getting lost in the words, he says, the surface stuff and arguing with him, but going straight to the core, to his heart. Wow. How many arguments do you avoid with that kind of wisdom? She concludes, once the fear was out of the way for both of us, we could start brainstorming about the trip and find solutions. We couldn't have done that with all the fear that was there before. So it looks like we probably won't go to Bryce. We'll probably rent a little cabin in the mountains, like 3 hours driving from the house. We'll see the snow. We'll still see mountains. We'll still see cabins. We'll avoid or canyons. We'll avoid traveling by plane. We'll have a relaxing time. And I said that we will, as soon as I can, as soon as I feel up to it, go to the canyon. And it'll be wonderful. Even as I write this, I feel gratitude in my heart for my wonderful husband. He knows what matters most. Most people don't. This is just touching, that you have the wisdom to recognize that and not get caught up in an argument about the details. What we really want is happy relationships and happy lives, not to go to a particular place or buy a particular thing or do a particular task. I try to remember, and do almost always, no task is ever more important than a person. When we forget that, we're pretty much doomed. We might get the task done, but we're not going to be happy afterward. New subject from a CEO of a company, a man who has been learning and applying real love in his life, has a lot of things going on. And he says, I've been thinking about how I can be loving at work. He said, our company is presently being investigated by the government for some legal infractions that we haven't committed, but the investigation was instigated by complaints from our competitors, which is not unusual in our competitive field. I decided that during this legal mess, I can simply be loving and happy. I can simply be unafraid and let people feel my lack of fear. I can do this partly because I know that love is what really matters, much more than work. Being loving here, to me, means being fearless. So I can do these things. Demonstrate to my team through action and behavior that there's no reason to panic. Stay calm. Just do the investigation. Stay calm, and in his case, stay calm but not be cold or dictatorial. I cannot ride people hard or criticize them for mistakes, but keep them focused on the end goal. We've got to get this done. It's going to be okay. I can see this as an opportunity to learn and grow in a high-stress situation, while also keeping the rest of my life in balance and not taking stress out elsewhere. I can do this while showing the team how you truly lead. Their instinct is to scurry around and jump like monkeys for the investigators. I've gathered them together and told them how we will guide the process and have a role in the investigation. We don't let events control us. We ask clarifying questions. We're direct, honest, collaborative, and we look to set the tone and direction with the way we provide our data so that there's a chance for the regulators to see our view. And I have to do all this while making my team feel cared for, looked after, and appreciated for their hard work, and that they can feel good as we're handling this potentially stressful situation with high integrity. Write that down somewhere if you're a supervisor at work. This is real love in the workplace. I wrote a whole book about it, but there's the book right there. New subject. I know a woman, Terry, we'll call her, who works as a plumber in a large hospital where there are, well, you can imagine in a hospital how many pipes there are for everything. And there are a number of plumbers working on multiple jobs all the time. She works almost entirely with men who she says are negative, coarse, crass, gross, talk about meaningless things, and constantly jab at each other. She said she just hated the environment and wanted to quit her job. This was just, I don't know, less than a month ago. Well, I'll tell you what I told her. That's really kind of average guys on a job like that. It's not an unusual group. The meaningless talk, the poking, the jabbing, the coarseness, the gross talk. And it's what people do. It's not just guys, the negative talk. I mean, if you want an example of that, look at the last election. My golly, the country was enveloped in negative talk. And it didn't matter which side of the aisle you were on. Somebody had some nasty, bitter, hateful, and frightening thing to say about the other candidate and what would happen. In fact, the day before the election in USA Today, day before, day of, there was a full-page article that said the 12 things steps that you could take, or 12 things you could do to cope with life if your candidate loses, which is hysterical. And some of them were really pretty good. There's negativity every place. She described the fact that Terry did, that she might leave her job because she didn't like the guy she was working with. But if you leave such a workplace, the same idiots who, it's going to strike you really strange, but the same idiots you work with now, oddly, are going to transfer to the new place you work, or they're going to be people who are just like them, possibly worse. I can't count how many people have quit a job because they hated the people there. They go to the new job and the people are worse. And then she did what I suggested, which is kind of fun to see. I suggested that she just fill her life with the people around her who love her. And she did it. She started spending time with people who genuinely care about her. And she wrote this: work has been, this is in 3 to 4 weeks, work is now an entirely different experience for me. I choose peace with commitment. So several times this week, I've been able to do just what you said. I just looked at the men who were babbling as though they were little children. I just sit there, and rather than become annoyed, I just smile inside. This is so freeing. It feels powerful. And in fact, I got 2 or 3 texts from her today with great big asterisks and emojis and smiley faces telling me how much she was enjoying her life. And she has the same job. It's not the job. It's not the kid. It's not the house you live in. It's not the amount of money you make. It's not your boss. It's not the other drivers on the road. It's whether we feel loved and happy. So what do? We do exactly what this plumber did. She went out and found people to love her. She trusted the love that they gave her. When she went to work among these people that she used to find just impossibly coarse to be around, she remembered the love that she'd been given, and bit by bit, she learned to share it, even with these guys that she previously was disgusted by. Feeling loved and sharing it with other people changes everything. We'll see you next week.